I've got Jon Fleming here. He and I have been screwing around now for about 10 minutes on Zoom on my end, primarily trying to get things squared away. I love technology, man. It's just, I wish you were sitting in front of me right here in my desk. And
Yeah,
there's something about technology that wants to suck the life force out of you. But
true. Yep, yep.
And we were talking, I asked him if he was from Fort Worth. He goes, no, Dallas. And we were asking, and I was saying, do they have a problem with that? And because I know Fort Worth guys, if you call them Dallas, they don't like it, but they don't do that in Dallas, huh?
My wife and I love Fort Worth, and we go over there often. And so, no, no hard feelings with Fort Worth, but I understand the opposite might not be true,
Yeah,
which is okay.
it's funny. I even look at them a little differently. Just, I think because I love the Fort Worth Museum so much.
Yep, for
They have
sure.
such great Western art with Amon Carter and,
Yeah,
Richardson and, just a line of just insanity right there. And
agreed.
in fact, I learned about you, I think it was through Andrew Walker, who's the director
Yep,
there
yep,
at the Amon Carter.
yeah,
The I was
yeah.
like,
He just acquired a piece. I guess about 3 months ago
smart.
for the museum. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
smart. Yeah, I mean, we're
good
going to
guy.
get into your art because it's so interesting. I was sitting last night, just sitting looking at all that your blog and things you had painted, and man, there's just nothing like it. It is so unique and has such a strong voice. It sets you apart. And again, I don't want to go
I
right
appreciate
into
it.
it because the podcast will fly over there. But I mean, you can look in the background if people are watching this on YouTube and see some of the stuff, right? I mean, that comes from your design background, right?
A lot of it is informed and influenced by my years. I had a design studio for 25 years, and so that definitely has influenced it. People like Paul Rand and Saul Bass, who were 50s and 60s designers, focusing on simplicity and typography and graphic design, and so certainly they have influenced me among many others. But those are two of my design heroes for sure.
Mm. Now
Yeah, and it's interesting to go back too and just see all the different artists. Hopper is the easy one, but even Picasso and others, they were doing uh, during the early part of their careers, especially with Hopper, he was an illustrator, and
mhm.
so a lot of guys and gals got their start in that world,
Sure.
and
That's
that's
good.
true with me too. So,
Yeah, I mean, so many of my artists were or still are doing illustration. Uh,
yep.
there's a thread that I love about illustration, not only about the artwork that comes out of it, but just also the work ethic. Um,
Hmm.
I find illustrators, as a general rule, to be on top of everything, to have it all ready to go, that they are
Hmm.
very used to deadlines. They take it
Yep.
seriously. I'm sure that rings true to you, I would think. Yeah.
Well, no, absolutely, Mark. And having a design illustration studio, every creative is has their right brain engaged 100% of the time, but many of those do not intentionally activate the left side of their brain, and I think that's why you see a lot of starving artists because they have not been intentional about running a business and setting up a business and
Right.
operating as a business that's in the business of making money. And some guys don't care about money, and that's totally fine. And if they there's no condemnation there, but I really wanted it to be a tight ship and to run this business with as much efficiency as possible,
Yeah.
not taking it away from the creative at all, but running it in a way that it was going to be successful on every level.
Yeah. You'll see artists that do that so well, like Erin Hansen. I don't know if you know her, but she's a terrific artist and
Yep.
terrific business person. Kevin Kehoe is another one that really comes
Mm,
to mind.
yeah.
Matthews is another one there's certain artists that can seem to really be able to master both ends of that spectrum, which is not easy.
Yeah.
And there's a few, Kevin Chuppick, that can, really kind of do it on their own, but are smart enough to know that there are times you really do need to play with dealers and other shows and things to get that, um,
Yeah.
because you have to have exposure, right? I mean, no
Yeah.
matter how good you are, and you are good, you have to have that exposure elsewhere that you cannot probably get without someone else in the business, and which makes for good business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And just real quickly, I mean, my wife is her name's Kathy. She is you met her in New
Yeah,
York,
I
and
did. Lovely.
so she has come alongside in the last year and really been a huge help with fulfillment and admin. That's her strength, is admin and helping me do the things that I can do, but I don't like doing them.
Yeah.
And
And it
so
takes away
she's
from your core business
yeah,
too, which is
yeah,
I'm an artist painting.
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And what's her background? What's Kathy's background?
Yeah, so well, originally she was a flight attendant for American Airlines and she was based in New York City. But then she's been a mom and we raised our kids. And so she was a stay-at-home mom and helped just be a great role model for our kids. But then also we spent a few years homeschooling. And so she was headed that up and just did a fantastic job with that. So we did a little everything: private school, public school, homeschool, a little kind of a mixed bag of schooling. But she's been just such a huge part of their upbringing and so involved with them. So that's her background.
Yeah. And now they're kind of out of the nest and she can focus on you
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
and grandkids. So we've got four grandkids, and so
Wow. Uh-huh.
she's doing exactly what she wants to do. Initially, it was being a mom, and now it's being a Mimi. So I'm dude, and she's Mimi, and so she's working for me part time and being Mimi part time,
Yeah.
which she loves. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Now you're from originally I know you're a Texan, but you were born in Kansas, right?
yeah. Born in Wichita and moved. My family moved to Dallas when I was 5. So I'm 61. So been here
You're a
almost
Texan.
all my life.
Yeah. And what did your folks do? What was their profession?
Yeah, so my parents I grew up, they were musicians, and so my dad
Wow.
led the music in these small little Baptist churches I grew up in, and they were tiny. And then my mom played the piano, and so my upbringing was watching my mom and my dad lead music in these small Texas churches, which I love. And um, my dad went on into the oil field business many years later. Um, but they still have those musical roots that came from their grandparents as well. Now, my grandparents were farmers and ranchers, and so I got to see that as a kid. My
And that was in
mom's
Kansas?
yeah, up in so Fredonia, Kansas, southeast Kansas. My granddad had a 2,000-acre cattle ranch, not big, not small, but grew crops, raised cattle. And so my earliest memories were seeing my granddad and my uncle and aunt lived on the ranch farm there as well, getting to see them work and their day in and day out jobs that they were doing. But then also in the small town of Fredonia, and they were about 6 miles outside of town, got to see these blue collar men and women working in the oil field industry and the ranching and the farming industry and other things, and really have a fondness and a soft place in my heart for the blue collar worker.
I bet. I bet. I have no doubt. Now, when your dad and mom were working in these churches, they're all Baptist churches?
They were little Southern Baptist churches, yeah,
And
yeah,
they
and
would
so it
bring,
was a
were they the
small.
entertainment? Were they the ones that were like the highlight to come in and, you know,
No, they were actually employed. Interestingly enough, so they were employed by these little churches, and so you can only imagine, especially in the '60s and '70s. My dad's salary was quite small, and so yeah, in order to make ends meet, he would work during the church during the day, and then at night, he would go to work at a filling station. And so
Yeah.
he had a knowledge of engines and things like that growing up on the farm. And so he worked at a filling station. And so I remember my dad, again, a blue collar, lower middle class guy, doing whatever it took to provide for his family. And so my mom and younger sister and I would go up in the evenings to the Exxon station and sit on the concrete steps of that little gas station and eat supper with my dad, take a break while he was eating dinner, and then we'd go back home. So I saw two parents working extremely hard, and I saw the benefit of that. My mom taught piano because she was a piano player and musician. So to help supplement that income, my mom taught piano.
And why did they move to Dallas? Just more opportunities?
Get out of Kansas.
Yeah, yeah, it's more opportunity.
More opportunity. I think my dad and mom, great memories growing up in a farm ranch environment, but that was not really in their DNA. They didn't want to be farmers and
Right.
ranchers, and
Hard.
so yeah, to your point, it was to have more opportunity in a big city. And by the way, I love Kansas. I get back and I love the farm and the ranch. My cousin still has it. He's my age. He still runs it and
Nice.
does a fantastic job with it. So I love Kansas. But they were at a place in their marriage. They were 20 when they were married, and they just said we want to do something different. And so they came to Texas.
And have they passed your folks?
No, they're still here. Yeah, my mom
That's
and my dad
amazing.
live in Nacogdoches, and so East Texas. So I
What do
visit with them weekly.
what do they
Yeah.
think when they see one of your paintings at almost $100,000?
You know what? They couldn't be prouder of the work that I've done and doing, and but I can just say honestly, they're bent along with a lot of other people's tastes. That my folks are not going to gravitate naturally towards what I do.
Right, I get it.
Their aesthetic is probably more of a traditional
Sure.
approach, whether it's Western art or any other kind of art, and so which is totally fine. I mean, that's the beauty of art, right? It's
Right.
subjective, and it doesn't float everybody's boat. And so, uh, yeah, when so they totally, again, super proud of where I am in my career, but and they do have pieces of mine in the house, but I think probably hanging one of these big 4x5, 4x6, very bold graphic pieces in their house probably wouldn't fit.
Yeah. And were
Yeah.
they, because I assume probably as a kid you were interested in art, right? When you were growing up,
Yeah,
like
absolutely. I
grade
mean, from an
school.
early age. Yeah,
Yeah.
from an early age. I was sitting in when we were still in Wichita, Kansas. I was 5, and I was sitting in my little Sunday school class, and there was this kid next to me drawing a jet airplane. And you have to remember, this is the height of the Vietnam War, right?
Right.
And so jet airplanes and tanks and all these things were on little boys' minds. And so he was drawing this jet airplane. I looked over at him. And I thought, man, that is the coolest jet airplane I've ever seen. And so ever since then, I've been trying to draw a cool or cooler jet airplane. Um, and so it was something at 5, something just clicked, and something when I saw this kid drawing this picture, I thought that's really cool. Now woven, throughout from 5 until now have been many other, football. I played high school football, music. I played piano, and so I'm. There are other things I'm interested in, but that common thread has been art and drawing or creating in some form or another.
Were you getting awards when you were a kid or recognition when you were a kid in like, elementary, junior high, even high school?
In elementary school and junior high school, I was the kid who was looking out the window and not paying attention to his teacher because I was drawing on a piece of paper, and
Yeah.
the kids around me would pay me a quarter or 50 cents for these drawings. I talked to a kid or a guy the other day, said, I've still got one of your drawings. In high school, I did enter, I think I was encouraged by my mom to enter a little competition and won first place in that. But I never really, in high school, art, it was more sports centric. And so I was on the football team and all the way through varsity in high school. And so that was really my focus.
Yeah.
Again,
Texas.
sketching and yeah. So, but yeah, so especially in Texas, yeah, football and art was a common thread, but it wasn't my primary focus.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. But you were
Yeah.
still doing awards and getting awards and
Yeah.
entering things. And
Yeah.
so when you got through high school, what did you think you wanted to do? Did you know for
The only way I knew, Mark, was that in between my junior and senior year of high school, the teacher passed out this list and it had all these different occupations and kind of approximate salary that you could
right,
make with each of
right.
these. And the one that stood out to me, that resonated with me, was this thing called graphic design.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, graphic design, that's, creating logos and branding and things like that. And I thought, well, that sounds cool. So I went to Texas State, formerly known as Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos, and studied design for 4 years. And that's when the light bulb really turned on, and that's when, as a student in high school, is very average. Once I got to college and was focusing on what I wanted to do, that's when I really blew up and became um, uh, hyper focused on that discipline. And so I was taking 21 hours each semester, making the dean's list. I mean, I was really on to what I wanted to be
Right.
doing, and so that's when it started to really flourish.
And were your folks supportive of that? I mean, it's such a different job from what they could probably imagine.
Yeah, they absolutely were, and they've been supportive the whole way through. My dad made me my first drafting table. Again, he's handy with wood, and I got that from him. But he's handy with wood and building things, and he made my first drafting table for him. So that was one of his ways of supporting that. And then my mom would take me to the art store and buy me an easel or a chair or whatever. And so they're extremely and continue to be extremely supportive.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
you finish at in your schooling in graphic design, I assume, right?
yep,
Yeah. And so what did you do? How do you make a living after that? What do you do with the graphic design? And that would have
exactly.
been in maybe about
85.
85.
Yeah, 85. You're right. So 85, I came back to Dallas because I knew I wanted to be back here. Got hired by a design firm called Sullivan Perkins and worked there for 8 years and really used that as kind of a postgraduate experience because it was something where I was getting paid for what I was doing and I was doing what I loved. But I was not just focused on the design advertising aspect of that job. I was interested in the whole ball of wax. I wanted to know how meetings were handled. I wanted to know how jobs were invoiced. I wanted to know how to set up a meeting. I wanted to know everything about a business because my goal from the get-go was to do my own thing. And so 8 years at this design studio, and then 1993, uh, equipped with all that knowledge now, and it was an amicable parting, and they understood. Opened my own design studio in 93, and for 25 years did branding, design work, illustration for Neiman Marcus and Sony and FedEx and many other big companies and small companies, but did that when we were raising our kids. But Mark, the one thing that really made the difference for me as a fine artist is that um, I knew that if I wanted to have any chance of having kind of a post career in fine art, I had to start that at the same time I was running my design business. And
Right.
so after we had family time in the evening and after, we had time with the kiddos and tuck kids into bed, read stories, said prayers. I had a choice to make, and that was either to fall asleep with that last kid, which I did a few times, or to get up, go out to our garage, which was a detached garage at the time, turn the lights on, and get busy and start
Yeah.
working. And that's what I did. I chose to do that, and that made all the difference in the world because nobody else was gonna make that happen, obviously. And so I just got after it. And so while I had my design business, I'm building equity and a reputation in the fine art world behind the scenes.
Hmm.
But I had galleries starting to collect the work, or galleries starting to represent, museums starting to collect the work, um, known collectors starting to buy the work. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was something that was intentional too, so that when I did get to the point 6 years ago to finally cut the design strings and to kind of burn those ships and move full forward with fine art, I was already well down the runway with fine art. And so it was risky, but it was calculated.
Yeah.
And,
You
and
know,
so,
and
yeah.
did you know, listen, this is really where my heart is, making art, my own art to sell versus the business component of helping others come up with graphics and designs and working probably with other artists. Did you know that pretty much fairly soon after you started your own business?
You know, that when it really hit me probably three-quarters of the way in during those 25 years that I realized, and I love my clients. My clients have been wonderful and have been so supportive in many ways. But um, I got to a point where I wanted to be the client. I
Yeah.
no longer wanted to have, and it was just a season I was ready to switch gears. And so I wanted to be the client. And that's when I started to make plans to move to fine art full time. And so now I'm my client. Now, side note, from time to time, I have companies who come to me and say, "Hey, we would love to license your art
I bet.
for a project, a collaboration, a partnership we want to do." 99% of those I turn down, but people like uh, Takovis, John Wayne. I just finished a big project with Yeti. Um, and there are several of the Drover Hotel over in Fort Worth. So there are a number of others. If it's if it's a like-minded brand,
Right.
and if the vision is the same, um, then the likelihood of me jumping in and doing something with them, and I had three criteria, Mark, when I left, when I put the design business to bed, went full-time fine art. The only way I was going to do a commercial collaboration had three criteria. One, it had to be fun.
Mm.
Two, I had to love the people I was working with. And three, the money had to be really great. And I
Yeah.
tell people that right up front because I don't want in that because otherwise, again, I want to be the client. And so the cool thing about it is each of these partnerships, collaborations, whatever you want to call them, uh, each of these, the folks I'm dealing with have just said, "Hey, we don't want to jack with anything. All we want to do, you tell us how you want the art to be handled." And so they've been so accommodating and just kind of overboard, just going overboard with helping me protect the brand. And
Right.
so that that part of it has been really good. But like I said, most of those I turn down gently simply because it's not a fit.
Yeah. And does
Yeah.
the fit also, you have the three criteria, but is there a fourth that they have to be of significant visual out there in the world that it makes sense to do, that it's going to not only you'll have fun and you'll like them and you'll make a great deal of money, but
Yep.
you'll also help your own brand and how it's seen in the world. I would think that would be a very important component.
No, that's great, Mark, and that's a great observation. And most of the time, that is true. There is a company in Mineral Wells. It's called Crazy Water. Been around since the 1880s. So in the 1880s and mineral wells and 1920s and 30s, celebrities would go to mineral wells to bathe in the mineral water because it was supposed to be healing, right? Now it still is healing, and there's been this resurgence, and they're still pulling this water out of these underground aquifers, and it's this bottled water. But they came to me a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, we would love um, to do a collaboration with you. We'd love to license some of your work for this collaboration." And at first, I was real cold to the idea because it's a Texas company, which that was cool. Long story short, I got to know the family that owns Crazy Water, got to hear their story, go out there, spend time with them. But then also there's an advertising agency here in Dallas. It was formerly known as the Richards Group. It's called TRG now. Big time advertising agency that I used to work with when I had my branding studio. They were the ones who were handling the advertising for this. So I ended up saying yes, and I'm so glad I did because the collaboration has been incredible. I'll have to send you some of the work we're doing. But it's a smaller company, but is getting so much great exposure right now, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger in a large part because of this synergistic thing between the Crazy Water people, the advertising agency, and my work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I see I mean, your work is so graphic. I mean, I could see it on almost anything and everything. I mean, I could see how it would be hard to, you know, keep that under bridle because so many people would want to use it. I could see it for a zillion different things. And I don't know why it is, but it is. And I know you know it is, and
Yeah.
others know it. It seems
Well,
like one of the things I could see you really doing is prints too for yourself.
I have a whole, just like Majori, I've got a whole print side of my business
Yeah,
that is robust, thriving, and many other words like that. It's something we have, that's why I'm thankful for my wife Kathy helping me
right.
keep up with that. And I've got a great printer, Canyon Creek Art here in town, who I've been working with for 20 years, and they do my fine art printing and do an incredible job. So yeah, that's a big part of my business.
Yeah, I mean, you must get calls all the time for people who want to use your imagery.
Mark, I do, and again, I'm very respectful and thankful when those folks call, and I want to hear their story. But again, I'd say probably 95% of those. Just yesterday, a restaurant group reached out and um, shared with me what they were doing, and at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, it was a no because it wasn't a like-minded, it just, the brands didn't fit.
Right.
And that's the other thing, Mark, is I don't want my work everywhere.
I can understand that completely. Yeah, there
Yeah.
is something that can be negative about it if it's everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't want it everywhere. I want to be very wise and discerning and selective with
Yeah.
where that art shows up.
Yes, and I can also
Yeah.
see that you want it to do fine art. You want things that are in
Yeah.
museums and people's
Yeah.
collections, and not looked at as, oh, I've seen that image on a side of a, airplane or whatever. So that'd
Yeah.
be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And I have to be really careful about,
I
I have to
bet.
be, I have to steward, I have a responsibility to steward the art well for my collectors, because my collectors
Yeah,
now are paying lots of money for these paintings.
they
And
are.
so I have to make sure I'm looking out for them
Sure.
as well as myself, but really them, because for the reason you just mentioned, Mark, is that
Yeah.
I don't want it showing up everywhere. And I want the places that it is showing up for those collectors to go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool application. That's a cool way to use that.
When
So
you started doing this, I know you really came in as far as doing it as a all-time business only a few years ago, maybe three or so years ago, right? As just
probably about 5 or 6 now.
okay,
Yeah.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you started, because you've been doing it a while now, because you knew you were
Yep.
going to do it, did you immediately gravitate to this? I would assume it's something you kind of found.
No, great question, Mark. So my initial paintings were more, the look was a more impressionistic, for lack of a better word, more realistic. My work has never not been representational, so there's really no abstract in my art. Um, but in 2018, I had this idea. The words "modern cowboy" came to mind, and it was just something I wrote down on a scratch piece of paper, and I just started to doodle some different cowboy images, but were very bold and graphic. Um, and uh, they were part of a background that really was where the elements were separated. They weren't the painting wasn't all connected
Hmm.
like most traditional artists or Western artists and other artists. It's a contiguous thing, right? Everything's connected to everything. Well, my this modern cowboy series specifically is this kind of cubic angular approach with different uh, you know, geometrical shapes making up this image, this cowboy or cowgirl. Um, and that was very intentional. So 2018, I did my first modern cowboy image. And again, I have to remember it's been very successful, but I have to remember back then I was scared
I bet.
because I was doing something really different and I was a bit anxious because there was risk involved. And I'm like, okay, I've never seen another Western artist take this approach. Um, Now, there are other Western artists, Ed Mel, for instance, right? Angular, geometric, which, by the way, I'm a huge fan of, as I know you are, of Ed's work, and just a huge fan. Um, and so he has that approach with the
Right.
angular cubist kind of look, but still it's a contiguous painting, right?
Right.
Everything's connected, and so I wanted to blow that up and separate things out and make it again this very bold graphic uh, thing that really I have not seen in the world of specifically Western art, and so it really, and again, I was nervous about it, but when I threw it out there, I say threw it out there, I didn't throw it out there. When I started to present it
Right.
on social media, like on Instagram, uh, my collectors just really were very quickly interested and like, wow, can I come over and see some of these?
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
how big are these? And so anyway, and then it became a thing. And so, but no, to answer your question full circle here, now I didn't start out that way.
I wouldn't think so. I would think it would be something that you found, basically. You
Yeah,
know, that's generally how all great creative minds
yeah,
work. They're trying to have the gears find where it is. And hopefully, when it happens, it snaps, just like it did with Logan Hajesh. I can remember him going from these figures, these women figures, and then he caught something. He realized it and was like, "Oh, this
yeah,
is this is
yeah,
here," and then it just exploded for him. Um, and
yeah. And that's what it is this bit. And so inspiration exists, but it must find you working. And I think Picasso may have been the one that coined that phrase. But I've always subscribed, not always, for many, many years, I've subscribed to that theory that inspiration exists, but it must find you working. That's why I'm always working on something. When I say working, I'm always doodling or taking pictures of something or looking in an old 1962 Western Horseman's magazine. I mean, just always exploring and staying curious. And I have to chuckle at the guys who say, "Man, I'm just waiting for inspiration." I'm just like, "Well, bro,
good
good
luck.
luck with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen." And so, there's nothing original. Everything's been done, but nobody was paying attention, so it's got to be done again. And so what I've done has been done before, but maybe not in exactly the same way. So I've taken all these influences, just like every single other artist under the sun, taken all these different influences, put them in this big pot, stirred it up, and poured it out. It's oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But there's all these, it's Otis Dozier, it's William Lester, it's Everett Spruce, Jerry Bywater's, Texas guys. It's Maynard Dixon, Remington, Russell, Dunton, all those Western heroes, Paul Rand and Saul Bass, like I mentioned. It's Marsden Hartley and Stuart Davis. I mean, Stuart
Yeah.
Davis,
Especially
when I
those
first
guys.
saw his stuff,
Yeah.
what's that?
Especially those guys. I love Davies.
Yeah.
I love Hartley, and I see something that correlates there.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm standing squarely, firmly on those guys' shoulders, big time. And people like Ed Mell as well. I'm standing on their shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it works. I mean, it totally works. Do you do much drawing either? Or do you
Oh
draw?
yeah.
Yeah, I would think.
So all of my work originates, heart and head. So it's got to be an idea, and it's something that's come to me, and then all of my work starts out as pencil sketches. So I'm sketching and tracing paper, doing overlays, and playing with
Yeah.
composition, going back and forth. But then once I have a composition that I'm fairly comfortable with, Mark, I'll scan that into my computer. I work on a Mac, and I'll scan it into my computer. I'll pull that sketch up into Adobe Illustrator, and I'll start to build that sketch out in Adobe Illustrator. Hockney is a great example of somebody who's working digitally and even showing digitally.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that Cezanne and Picasso, all those guys would have been using the computer in some form or another had it been available then. But so I'm able to do a number of color studies, whereas in the old days when I used to do them by hand, I could do maybe two or three. So now I can do multiples, and that can be good and bad. So if you get too fussy with it and overwork it, then it can be bad. But if you use it as a tool to get to a place, which is what I do, I get to a place where I've got a color study and a composition that I like, and then I will use that color study as a go-by for my painting.
So you
Yeah,
draw it out, manipulate how you want it to kind of work those objects, and then start working with the colors. Once you get that, how you feel comfortable, and you probably
yeah,
know, then you go, okay, now I'm translating this. I go and you paint it.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and one other trick in there that I'm going to share. I used to just stand with that sketch in one hand and a pencil in another hand and
Right.
draw on these big canvases. And then it finally hit me one day. What am I doing? I'm recreating something I've already created. So
Yeah.
I went online to Etsy or eBay or one of those, and I bought me an old school, 1960s overhead projector
Yep.
for a quarter.
Yep.
It cost me $25 to have it shipped, but it cost me a quarter. And so I make transparencies of the sketch I've already done, and I just transfer that image on to the canvas, which makes things so much easier. And it's funny. It's interesting. I thought, well, I'm cheating, but it's like you look back at some of the 13th, 14th, 15th century artists, they were using these convex concave lenses
Yeah, they are.
in tints to transfer in a dark tint to transfer an image from the outside to the inside onto a canvas. So I thought, okay, I can do that.
Yeah, well, also you've already made the sketch
Yes.
from hand, right?
Yes.
It's not like you're taking a photograph and putting it
Yep.
on the wall of
Yep.
something you shot like a butte, but you've actually hand drawn it, come to it.
Yep.
Just trying to save the effort to have to redraw. It just speeds up the process a lot.
Yes.
But I
Absolutely.
get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that's cheating at all. I think that's just being a productive, efficient artist,
Yes.
so you can work harder. It's so
Agreed. Yeah.
everyone has their own methods, I've learned, and to me it's the final image and the creative. I mean, it all comes from your brain,
Hmm.
and I mean, all those images that you come up with are ones that you come up with, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and it'll be interesting to see because I'm sure it's happened or will happen. If not, people starting to go, oh, I'm knocking that off, you know?
Oh, it happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I see them and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have collectors or followers send me images. Hey, did you see this? Did you see this? And that usually involves a very friendly phone call or text or something, and just say, "Hey, man, thank you so much for. I appreciate that you appreciate my work, but that's it's one thing to be influenced; it's another thing to rip off."
Yeah.
And some things are just complete rip-offs. And
Yeah.
so I can see the line between somebody being influenced. I think, Picasso said good artists borrow and great artists steal. Well, he
Yeah.
didn't mean they rip off. He just meant they're influenced and they're taking pieces and parts that they like and using those to make up their own look or voice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, no, I could see that. I see it with Ed's stuff. People try to do that, and
yeah,
usually it's not very effective. But
yeah,
I think one of the things you have to do as an artist for your own market, important things are one, document every piece. You probably already do this with a
yeah,
log title and all that, and then really just
yeah,
have good documentation on the back so they know when these things come up at auction at some point, which they will, or
sure,
resale, which they will, because you can't control that there's
yeah,
no doubt that that's your painting and
right,
not really
yeah,
a fraud or a fake, because that's really what it is. When somebody literally takes your work and just tries to reproduce it, and whether they use their own name or not, they may try to use, I could see them trying to, fake your stuff because it's valuable enough that they would,
sure,
literally, Jon
yep,
Flaming,
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
that's,
yeah, it's a style. Frankly, it's a style that somebody could rip off. The one thing that I've done, so I create these textures but before I ever put paint on the canvas, I'm creating these textures with different molding pastes and other things. And within those textures that I'm using as building up a background, I am scraping and scrawling with different tools,
right.
little clues and signals into that texture that says, hey, this is mine.
Yeah.
And so a collector, a curator would be able to go, and I'm not going to say what they are because then that's the giveaway, but
Yeah.
there are things in those paintings, in
Oh,
the
I'm sure.
texture of the paintings that are the clues that, oh, that's a Fleming. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I could see this being a issue for you because you're so recognizable that people would want to try to take advantage of it. Yeah, I think the best way is, if you haven't, make a catalog raisonné of your own work, where it is,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And you control your own market pretty much, right? You don't really show at galleries too much other just than maybe shows, museum shows and things. Is that correct?
So for a number of years, Mark, I did show and I had a gallery in Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas, that showed my work for many years. And then about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, it was very amicable. There were no hard feelings. I just said, hey guys, I love to sell. I love to interact with my collectors. I love to have people in my studio. A lot, and just quick side note, a lot of artists don't. A lot of artists don't are not comfortable engaging or pricing or telling a collector,
Right.
sharing with a collector a price. That's not their comfort zone. I like the business of art and the art of business.
Mm-hmm.
To me, there's creativity on both sides, and so I enjoy doing that. And so that's what I'm doing now. Now, I had a show earlier this year with a gallery in Fort Worth that I love, Art Space 111.
Yeah, I saw
They did a
that.
show for me. Yeah, it was a wonderful show, and we have a great relationship. But that was for a certain length of time,
Right.
and I will continue to do that on a limited basis. But yeah, for the most part, I like building relationships, and I think you're the same way.
Yep.
I love building relationships with people, and if it's always a gallery or a gallery director who's dealing with the client or the collector, then I like I like I like the one-on-one with those relationships, and so and those relationships, I've got great friends now who I didn't know 10 years ago, who are now great collectors, but they're also great friends because of that.